Ooh. All right, I don't know what happened. This is the real Jonathan Smith show here on Indy's Sports Ticket. Hopefully you had a nice weekend. Yeah, here we go. We had playoff football over the weekend. IU got absolutely trounced by Iowa. Purdue continues rolling along, just winning every game that has been in front of them. And, I spent the majority of my weekend. Oh, also Tyrese Haliburton hurt his hamstring again, of course. I spent the majority of my weekend, though, watching football because that's just the way that I am, right? I really enjoy watching playoff football and watching, the best teams in the NFL, play football games. And I love sitting back and comparing them to the Indianapolis Colts, who just really struggled here, who really struggled down the stretch. And, it's just, frustrating to watch these NFL playoff teams and compare them to the Colts because the differences are so incredibly obvious, right? But there's one team in particular that really stuck out to me. One team in particular that really drew my attention in terms of their incredible leap from last year to this year, and that is the Denver Broncos. The Denver Broncos are the perfect example of how if you draft the right quarterback, all of your problems are solved immediately. The Broncos have more dead cap money than anyone else in the NFL. They're still paying Russell Wilson a lot of money. And they made the playoffs in the rookie year of Bo Nix, who was good. I would argue not great. I still think guys like Jaden Daniels and Caleb Williams are going to wind up, and Drake May as well, are going to wind up better than he is. But with that being said, Bo Nix still had a pretty solid rookie year. Okay. And the Broncos made the playoffs because of that, because of Sean Payton's ability to raise Bo Nix's level of play. And then you look at the Texans, and they're very similar, right? The Texans have won the division 2 years in a row, and they won a playoff game in back-to-back years with CJ Stroud, who's a good quarterback. Okay, a large part of teams like the Jets and the Giants and the Titans and the rest of the NFL teams that have been bad for forever or for a prolonged period of time has been because they haven't had a good quarterback. Okay, and you look at the Indianapolis Colts. Why have they struggled since Andrew Luck retired? They haven't had consistent play at the quarterback position. We thought there was a chance that Anthony Richardson would slide in, fill that role. He hasn't played very well, though, so it's very hard to pencil him in as the long-term starter for the Indianapolis Colts. Chris Ballard was asked about Anthony Richardson going forward during his press conference on Friday, and here's what Colts general manager Chris Ballard had to say.
Well, look, I don't think we can completely stamp it. We've seen some good things. I mean, we knew. Look, I like Anthony, and Anthony's done some really good things. All right, but there's been some potholes too. I think the number one thing. I mean, let me track back a little bit here. We knew when we took him it was going to be a roller coaster. I don't think I did a very good job. I think I explained that it's going to take some time, but look, I got excited too about the talent and the wow plays, but now we need the consistency down after down. But the number one thing we have to figure out and what Anthony's got to work through is staying healthy. Like you've got to stay, he's got to be able to stay healthy. And that to me is probably the biggest question right now, because now we're going on 2 seasons in a row, where he's dealt with injuries. So that's the first thing. And then number 2, being consistent, getting a consistent, down after down, play after play, consistency with him. And that takes time. I think the one thing you can see with look, we have zero patience as a league with quarterbacks. I mean, you're seeing it throughout the league where guys fail one place and now all of a sudden they're doing really well somewhere else. Every quarterback's journey and developmental cycle is different. And, I wish I had a magic wand that could wave it and get them to the top of the peak right away, but that's not realistic. The good news is, even with the back, which we think will be fine, he's going to go into the offseason healthy. all right, which last season he didn't. He was rehabbing a lot. So that's going to give him a chance to work on some things going forward that we think will help going into next season. Now, saying all that, we can't beat our head against the wall. We've got to have competition at the position, just for the fact that competition makes everybody better. And then two, he's not proving he can play 17 games.
Chris Ballard right there talking about Anthony Richardson and, why they're going to have, quote, competition at the quarterback position this upcoming season. He does his best right there to, kind of shelter Anthony Richardson from any and all criticism. But I am incredibly intrigued to see what this quote unquote competition is going to look like at the quarterback spot. I think we all know that it's probably going to be someone like Kirk Cousins or Aaron Rodgers. But as far as I'm concerned, that is not legitimate competition for Anthony Richardson. They need to draft a quarterback. They need to put real legitimate pressure on Anthony Richardson. Okay. Aaron Rodgers, great player. Didn't have a terrible year this year. Kirk Cousins did have a terrible year this year. So those two guys in the list of older veterans do not solve the Indianapolis Colts problem as far as the quarterback position goes. A 6th or 7th round pick will not solve the Colts problems at quarterback. Okay. I know that there's a pretty decent chance that Indianapolis Colts fans are going to be, asking for the Colts to draft Curtis Rourke in the 6th round and for that to be the competition for Anthony Richardson. Look, Curtis Rourke, really good college quarterback, tough, all those things. Probably not the right guy to push Anthony Richardson because a 6th or 7th round pick is just not, that's just not a ton of investment. Okay, the Colts need to really invest in competition for Anthony Richardson this offseason. That means drafting a guy with a 1st, 2nd, or 3rd round pick. Okay. And I say that, and I'm sure that, people are going to be like, oh, well, what if they're just bad this year and they tank for Arch Manning? The Colts do not need to tank for Arch Manning this year. The idea of tanking for Arch Manning is absolutely insane to me. More on that later. Okay. The quarterback position, it is the hardest position to evaluate by far in the NFL. It is an absolute crapshoot. When you look through the history of college or through the history of the NFL draft and where quarterbacks get drafted, most guys get drafted in the 1st round, and a lot of those 1st round draft picks are expected to show up and be good, even though most of them are not. About 20% of quarterbacks drafted in the 1st round end up being absolute superstars. Your Lamar Jacksons, your Josh Allens, your Patrick Mahomes. About 25% of them end up being solid starters. Think Alex Smith. And then the rest, the other 55%, usually turn out to be busts. Okay? There is absolutely no guarantee whatsoever that 2 drafts from now, Arch Manning is going to be any good. Even though this is considered this draft class this year, the 2025 class, it is considered a bad quarterback draft class. But no one knows. They don't. One of the quarterbacks from this draft class is going to wind up being a stud. I guarantee it. Even though no one seems to be impressed by Shedeur Sanders or Cam Ward or Jackson Dart or Quinn Ewers, one of these quarterbacks will wind up being a stud because that's just the way that the NFL draft works. Okay? For the Colts, they need to use real draft capital and draft a legitimate quarterback that might actually be the solution. Okay, don't take a flyer on Aaron Rodgers. Don't take a flyer on Kirk Cousins. Okay, use real draft capital on it. Maybe not the 1st pick. Maybe not that 14th overall pick where they're probably going to take Tyler Warren. Because I don't think that there's going to be anyone there with that pick that's actually worth taking. Cam Ward and Shedeur Sanders will likely be off the board, but don't get me wrong. If Cam Ward or Shedeur Sanders falls to 14, take them. Okay, the Colts should be able to draft a Jackson Dart who was pretty decent at Ole Miss, or a Quinn Ewers who was, pretty solid at Texas. They should be able to draft one of those 2 guys, and either one of those guys would be more than enough competition for Anthony Richardson. And if they wind up being better, like Quinn Ewers coming out of high school was the highest rated recruit ever, as long as they've been, because they give stars out, but they also rate guys as well. Like not all 4 stars are made equal. There's like high level 4 stars and low level 4 stars, and same thing with 5 stars. Okay. Quinn Ewers, highest rated prospect coming out of high school football ever. If he ends up living up to that potential that people kind of stamped him with when he was coming out of high school, then the Colts are going to be, just fine if he winds up meeting that expectation. And if he doesn't, then you can take another quarterback later. Back to the Arch Manning thing, because I've seen this idea floated around, and I think that as this next season continues and as we get closer to restarting the season, I do think that this is going to be a thing once again. The Colts should not tank for Arch Manning. They absolutely not. It would really bother me if they did that. Okay? And this is an idea that you're going to hear a lot, and I find it to be incredibly ignorant. Okay. And I also think it's probably way too early to have a stance on this. Okay. I know everyone thinks that this 2026 quarterback draft class is going to be great, but I am just not convinced of that. I'm not convinced of that in the slightest. Okay. The 2 prized possessions of what is supposed to be an outstanding 2026 NFL quarterback draft class are Arch Manning and Nico Iamaleava, who started at quarterback for Tennessee this year, and he was not spectacular in the slightest. He's supposed to be the other big guy. Meanwhile, we've seen Arch Manning throw 95 passes in college. For reference, that's only 30 more passes than Anthony Richardson threw his first 2 years in college. Okay, there is absolutely no guarantee whatsoever that either one of those guys are going to be great. The Colts should take a quarterback this year because every quarterback coming out this year has played a ton of football. And there is a correlation between playing a lot of football in college and players that succeed, or quarterbacks that succeed early in the NFL. Bo Nix was a starting quarterback for 5 years. Jaden Daniels was a starting quarterback for full 4 seasons. He got hurt his sophomore year. Otherwise, he would have played that full season as well. Caleb Williams was a starting quarterback for 3 years in college. Michael Penix played 6 seasons. He battled injuries throughout it, but he still attempted over 1,500 passes during his time in college. For reference, that's almost 5 times the amount of a guy like Anthony Richardson, who only played 1 season. Trevor Lawrence, say what you want about him. He's a pretty solid NFL quarterback who earned a max contract. Okay. He started 3 full seasons at Clemson. Brock Purdy, 6th-round pick. He started all 4 years at Iowa State, and he showed up, and he, played pretty well. Jared Goff played 3 full years in college, and you can just keep working your way down the list. Quarterbacks that have a lot of college experience tend to have an easier time transitioning to the NFL, right? Especially compared to guys like Anthony Richardson, who only played 1 year. Trey Lance, who played half a year, a spring game, and then got drafted 3rd overall. Okay? Trey Lance is currently a backup on his second team, and Anthony Richardson is on the verge of winding up in the same boat. If the Colts draft Arch Manning in 2 years, right, if they decide to throw away the 2025 season, which I don't think they'll do because Shane Steichen is coaching for his job and Chris Ballard is, fighting for his job as well. In theory, we'll see. If they throw away 2025 to potentially draft a guy in Arch Manning, I just don't think it makes a ton of sense. We'll have seen him play 1 year of college football. I know that he was the top high school recruit in his class, but so was Quinn Ewers, and Quinn Ewers ended up not being as good as everybody thought that he would be. Okay, those rankings aren't always correct. And look, I get it. Arch Manning, he's Peyton Manning's nephew, and it'd be a great story if he, started up, another dynasty. Dynasty is a really heavy word for what Peyton Manning did with the Colts, but if he came here to Indianapolis and he revived the franchise, it'd be a great story. Stories are cool. I like stories. Okay. I read books all the time, but I got to be honest, when it comes to my football team, I don't really care about great stories. I care about drafting good, proven players. Now, Arch Manning may wind up being great, but as of right now, we do not know. If we had already seen a season from Arch Manning and he was ripping the ball all over the field and all that kind of stuff, and people wanted to call it the tank for Arch Manning, I'd be like, hey, okay, that makes sense. I can get behind that. But we haven't seen the kid throw 100 passes in college yet. We have no idea how good that guy's going to be. Why in the world would the Colts throw away a season to potentially draft a quarterback that we know nothing about right now. The Colts should draft a quarterback this year. There is no point whatsoever in waiting for Arch Manning or any other quarterback that's out there, because tanking for, a high draft pick to draft a quarterback that you like doesn't always pan out, because as I pointed out earlier, the success rate of first-round quarterbacks drafted isn't very high. About 20% of them end up being superstars, 25% end up being solid starters, and the other 55% end up being busts. Okay? Tanking doesn't always pan out. That's what the Miami Dolphins did. They tanked for Tua. I remember being, I guess, geez, what year did he get? 2021. I remember being in college and being excited about it. Every game we lost, I was like, this is great. And, they tanked for Tua. They draft him fifth overall, and it's not panning out the way that they thought that it would. Okay? They're paying that guy a whole bunch of money to not make the playoffs. Okay? So tanking for any player doesn't always pan out. The Colts should not tank for Arch Manning, rip the Band-Aid off, draft a quarterback this year, allow him to compete with Anthony Richardson, and let's see what happens from there. Oh, man, big show today. Just got a ton of stuff going on. It's honestly awesome. Coming up at 11 o'clock, Zach Hicks is going to join me. We're going to talk about the master BSer, Chris Ballard, and everything that he had to say in his press conference. That'll be fun. Love talking to Zach. NFL playoffs started Saturday. They finished up tonight with the Vikings and the Rams. Something that I noticed in all those games, I'm going to go over that. Tyrese Haliburton, he needs to learn how to stretch. He hurt his hamstring once again, and that is what we're going to talk about when we come back here in about 4 minutes.
Unadulterated sports talk with unfiltered takes. It's the real Jonathan Smith Show on Indy Sports Ticket, 1430 AM and 99.5 HD2.
What's going on? It's the real Jonathan Smith Show here on Indy's Sports Ticket. What's going on? Gritty chiming in over on YouTube. If you want to watch the show on YouTube, head over, search for Indy's Sports Ticket. We should pop up pretty quickly. Subscribe, watch the stream there, comment on everything that we got going on here on the real Jonathan Smith Show. Gritty weighing in, saying there's no need to talk about how much IU basketball stunk it up Saturday. Don't waste any airtime on it. I'm going to talk about it coming up probably here in about 20 minutes. Just because I don't think it's a reason to panic. Like, you had a game where you didn't shoot the ball well, and Iowa shot the ball incredibly well. Sometimes it happens. Just ask Nebraska fans. That's what happened to them against Purdue on yesterday. I mean, I don't know if you saw the Purdue game, but they just trounced Nebraska. Wasn't even close. Anyway, the Indiana Pacers also played last night. They played against arguably the best team in the NBA. I got to be honest, though. I don't think that the Cleveland Cavaliers are the best team in the NBA. I think it's the Thunder. And I say that, and you're like, oh, but the Thunder lost to the Cavaliers just last week. How can you say that? Because Chet Holmgren didn't play in that game. That's how I can say that. But the lead takeaway from the Pacers beating the Cleveland Cavaliers, holding them to 93 points, should be the fact that they held the best offense in the NBA to 93 points. The lead should be the fact that they've now won 6 in a row. The lead should be that they look really good right now. But yeah, that's not the lead. The lead is Tyrese Haliburton hurt his left hamstring again. And I'm sure of the opinion that we need to teach this guy how to stretch. Tyrese, when you wake up in the morning, man, just touch your toes like 4 or 5 times, get the day started out, get those hamstrings stretched out. I've got this really cool gadget at home. It's called a Theragun, and it's basically this awesome massage gun, and you can just run it over your hamstrings and it'll loosen them up. You've got a whole training staff there with the Indiana Pacers to help you stretch and help you get your body right and do all these things. And you're hurting your hamstring again. You got to stretch. You got to be ready to go. It's really frustrating because this Pacers team was really kind of hitting their stride. I mean, just absolutely rolling. Jarris Walker is starting to play better, and Benedict Mathurin is kind of finally slid into his role properly, and Andrew Nembhard just impacts winning on an excellent level, and all these things are kind of starting to slide into place, and then this happens. Best player for the Indiana Pacers, Tyrese Haliburton, gets hurt. Now, last night, it wasn't a bad thing because he wasn't very good. Minus 14 in 19 minutes. He only played in the first half. 2 points, 5 assists. Great. That's cool, man. But for me, you got to have more than just that from your best player, and you definitely can't afford to have him get hurt when your team is finally starting to hit their stride. Right? Thomas Bryant, if you want really glass half full stuff, love him. The fact that the Pacers got him for a second round pick, the fact that he's been able to come over and be impactful has been really nice. Jarris Walker last night had an awesome game. Okay. He led the Pacers in plus minus. They were plus 21 when he was on the floor, and he led them in rebounding. He had 12 rebounds in 20 minutes. Okay. Really impressive. If he rebounds like that, he will continue to find playing time on the floor. Okay. As I said to kind of open, the thing that we should be focusing on is how they held the best offensive team in the NBA to 93 points. Okay. That is incredible. And I understand that part of it is because, the Cavaliers just didn't shoot the ball very well, right? They just kind of struggled to shoot it. They missed some open ones, but I thought that the Pacers did a really good job of rotating around and contesting a lot of their shots. The Cavaliers have been the best 3-point shooting team in the NBA. They take a lot of them, and they shoot it at a better percentage than anyone else in the NBA, at least heading into last night they did. I'm sure that they probably dropped a couple of spots after that. But just a really impressive defensive performance from the Pacers last night. Part of that is because Tyrese Haliburton got hurt in the second half. Because Tyrese Haliburton, much improved defensively, much better off the ball than he is on the ball. And I don't expect him to ever be a great on-ball defender. But when you've got Andrew Nembhard and Benedict Mathurin playing more minutes together, or TJ McConnell and Nimhard or Mathurin, like you're just going to be better defensively than when Haliburton's in there. And so they defended well. They're down by 15 points in the third quarter, mounted it just an awesome comeback, and they came back to win. Like they held the Cavaliers to 18 points in the third quarter, outscored them 37-18, which is just an absolute testament to the Pacers front office and the way that they've built this roster. There is so much depth. There are so many good players. Okay. And once again, this is all without Aaron Nesmith coming back yet. When he comes back, there's going to be even more depth and another really good player. Okay. I mean, they outscored the Cavaliers, 68-40 in the second half without Tyrese Haliburton. Okay. This team's going to be fine without him. I think that their upcoming schedule should lighten up a little bit. I know that they have to play Cleveland once again on Tuesday night. So tomorrow night, that's here at home. Go to that game. It should be a blast. And then they get a couple easy games, right? They go to Detroit, which isn't an easy game, but that's a game that they should win. Then they get Philadelphia at home, who's stumbling, not playing very well. And then this Thursday and Saturday, they go to Paris, where they play against the Spurs. I hate that they're playing those games in Paris. I wanted them to play here so I could go watch Wemby because he's just an absolute stud. Okay, and then they get Detroit at home when they come back. So they've got an easier-ish schedule. Okay, over these next 5, 6, 7 games. So hopefully they can go 3-2, just have a winning record without Haliburton. Hopefully within the next month or so he's back and he's ready to roll after the All-Star break, because they're obviously going to need him if they want to win games in the playoffs. Look, it's just hamstring tightness. I don't really know what that means. I don't know, how severe that is. It's pretty vague, as it should be. But, they'll be fine because they're deep and they've got a lot of really good young players. I want to direct my attention now to the playoffs. Right? The NFL playoffs, they're happening. I talked about them a little bit, right? You notice the quarterback play and how it's way better than what the Colts have had over the last 4 years. And the other thing that I noticed, and that I just, it makes a lot of sense, is the reason why teams in the playoffs lose is because of the reasons why they lost in the regular season. If that makes more sense, it's just more obvious. Like, for example, the Broncos lost because they couldn't slow down Josh Allen. The Broncos had the 19th ranked pass defense in the NFL, and it was on display yesterday. Josh Allen tore them up. Okay, the Broncos were 21st on the season in yards per carry allowed, right? They didn't control the line of scrimmage at all. Or excuse me, they were 21st on the season in yards per carry themselves, and they didn't control the line of scrimmage offensively at all after that first drive. The Bills also have Josh Allen, and that kind of matters. But, like you watch the Broncos, and it's like, okay, like their issues are pretty obvious. They don't run the ball very consistently, and their pass defense outside of Patrick Surtain isn't great, right? And then you look at the Steelers, and the Steelers lost because they couldn't consistently move the ball, right? That was the issue in the final 5 weeks of the season. They finished the season having lost 6 games in a row, which is that's a really tough look. They just don't have the quarterback needed to win in the playoffs, especially against the Ravens. And we saw that, right? Throughout the season with Russell Wilson, there were these glaring spots where it's like, yeah, Russell Wilson cannot get it done. And then you look at the Chargers, and I feel bad for Justin Herbert because he's going through it. But the Chargers didn't lose because of Justin Herbert. The Chargers lost because they just don't have the weapons. Ladd McConkey was the only player for the Chargers who could get open. All right. Everyone else couldn't, create any sort of space whatsoever. And, yesterday was National Pile on Justin Herbert Day. But, like, he clearly needs weapons. Like, that clearly needs, they clearly need some upgrades over Quentin Johnston and Joshua Palmer. Okay. The Packers lost because they turned the ball over 4 times. Jordan Love is just a huge risk taker. The games that they lost, he usually turned the football over. He threw 3 picks yesterday. Okay, he threw 11 in the regular season in 15 games. Okay, he's a guy who turns the ball over, and sometimes that's a good thing because he'll make throws that he probably shouldn't, but because he's so talented, he figures out how to fit it in, and it leads to you winning some games, but it also leads to you losing some games. And they played an Eagles team yesterday that was super healthy, the healthiest team entering the playoffs. And he couldn't get away with some of those throws. He couldn't. Okay. The Buccaneers last night, they've struggled defensively all year. They kicked a field goal with like 6.5 minutes left to go in the fourth quarter, and they didn't see the football again because their defense couldn't get off the field. Okay, like teams in the playoffs lose because of the thing that they stunk at during the regular season. Okay, like these teams tell us who they are for 18 weeks, and we should believe them, whatever they have to say about who they are. Okay, and as I was thinking about this, I started thinking about the Colts. Like, what did the Colts communicate to us over their, 18 weeks of mediocrity? Which mediocrity feels like I'm cutting them a bit of a break because it was, way worse than mediocrity that they showed us at certain points. And I think that the Colts showed us that they were unserious, inconsistent, and pretty clearly just not a playoff team. Like the Colts compared to every team that played yesterday or on Saturday, like watching the Texans, how well coached they were and how many just really good players they had on defense. Like you compare them to the Colts, it's like, geez, like they feel like they're eons ahead of the Colts because they just had so many more good players than the Colts do. You look at the Chargers and it's like the same thing. It's like, geez, like I know they got blown out, but defensively, like they've got a lot of really good players, and they got a guy in Justin Herbert who's awesome, and they drafted Ladd McConkey, like that's a hit. They've got a really good offensive line. It's like, geez, like the Colts don't feel anywhere close to that, and you just kind of keep working your way through all the teams, and you just realize like the Colts compared to the Bills, they are so far away from being that, and I think a lot of it has to do with the lack of seriousness in the locker room and the inconsistency. Like Anthony Richardson was a child. Okay. We knew that from the moment that he did the whole backwards hat thing. Okay. Zaire Franklin piled on to the unseriousness in the locker room with his podcast. Okay. The Colts, when it comes to inconsistency, there were some weeks where they looked really good. And then they'd lose to Malik Willis or Drew Lock. Right. And they ended up not in the playoffs because of it. Like that is who this Colts team was this year. And I'm really looking forward to 11 o'clock to kind of unpack more of this stuff with Zach Hicks. We're going to talk a lot about Chris Ballard and his press conference and everything that kind of went on with that. When we come back here in about 4 minutes or so, we're going to talk about Indiana losing on the road to Iowa, and Purdue, man. They just keep rolling, man. They shot the crap out of it yesterday. More on that when we come back here in about 4 minutes.
Often imitated, never duplicated. The Real Jonathan Smith Show. This is Indy Sports Ticket 1430 AM, 93.9 HD2, and always on the free Indy Sports Ticket app.
What's going on? The Real Jonathan Smith Show here on Indy Sports Ticket. Thanks for tuning in, no matter how you're tuning in. I greatly appreciate it, whether that's Twitter. You can watch the live stream there at _ Jonathan Smith. Make sure you follow me. I'm dropping bangers on Twitter. Not really. I need to get better at Twitter. I don't know if I need to troll people more. I don't know if I just need to send out more thoughts. I don't know. Anyway, so you can watch there on Twitter. You can also watch on YouTube, Indy Sports Ticket. If you want to head over there, subscribe. If you watch there, you can jump in the chat. You can drop comments on everything that I'm saying. All that good stuff. You can also download that Indy Sports Ticket app wherever you download your apps. You can live stream my show there. You can also live stream the Dan Dockett show there, which is on today from noon to 3. He'll have many, many thoughts, I'm sure, on this Indiana basketball team that I'm actually about to start talking about. Zach Hicks joining the show here in about 20 minutes. But Indiana went on the road Saturday night, excuse me. And they played Iowa. Iowa is it's a pretty prototypical Iowa team this year. A lot of guys who can really shoot the ball, really good offensively, play at a decently fast pace, all that kind of stuff. And Indiana got absolutely crushed. It was really interesting. After that game was over, I didn't see any comments about hey, I don't think IU needs Malik Renew, even though, I'm willing to bet when you only score, what was it, 60 points? When you score 60 points, I'm sure it'd be nice to actually have your leading scorer on your team. I think that would actually be really helpful. And so, yeah, it's really interesting. I didn't see any tweets like that. Miles Rice, he led him scoring with 12 points. Omar Ballo had 10, only took 7 shots, only took 1 free throw. He missed it. So I'm not freaking out. Sometimes you just have nights where you don't shoot the ball well. Okay? And it's not good when that night's against Iowa, a team that can absolutely light it up, a team that leads the Big Ten in scoring and in three-point shooting. Okay? Some nights you're just going to have games where you don't make shots and your opponent seems to make everything. Just ask Penn State. Penn State's a really good offensive team. Indiana went up there and shot the ball really well, especially in the second half. Meanwhile, Penn State couldn't buy a bucket. Okay? So sometimes that just happens. Sometimes you have days where you just don't make shots. What's not okay and should absolutely never happen is having more turnovers than assists. Indiana had 16 turnovers in that game against Iowa, which is just way too many. And they only had 15 assists. And that's problematic. You can't win games that way. Okay, I don't know what the record is for teams that have games where they have more turnovers than assists, but I'm willing to bet that it's not very good. Okay? You can't turn the ball over that much, and on offense, you have to move the ball a lot more. Okay? When Indiana was on their win streak, when they won 6 games in a row, they were excellent at not turning the ball over. They only averaged 9.2 turnovers per game. They had one game during that win streak where they turned the ball over way too much. And it was against Penn State, where they turned it over 14 times. But guess what happened in that game where Indiana turned the basketball over 14 times? They shot 39% from 3 in that game. So if you're going to turn the basketball over a lot, you better make a lot of shots. Okay? But if you turn it over a lot, like they did against Iowa, and you only shoot 25% from 3, then you're probably not going to win. Okay. And, Iowa, in addition to winning the turnover battle, they also just completely and totally outshot Indiana. I mean, they shot a whopping, 46% from 3 to Indiana's 25%. Iowa shot 54% from the floor as a whole to Indiana's 41%. I mean, it was just an absolute offensive clinic. Okay. I mean, just absolute clinic offensively from Iowa, right? They're making shots, moving the ball well, 18 assists. I mean, just a really impressive performance from the Hawkeyes. Just go look at the box score. I mean, just absolutely lit it up. And the other thing that I thought really stuck out for Indiana is they just didn't do a very good job of getting good shots for Omar Ballo. He only took 7 shots, which is nowhere near enough. Okay, so Indiana has to shoot the ball better. They have to avoid turning it over. I mean, 16 turnovers. I mean, sheesh. You're just asking to lose games. But Omar Ballo, he's got to get more than 7 shots. It's just not enough. It's not enough. Then again, if Indiana had actually made some outside shots, then that probably would have freed them up a little bit. But Indiana has to be better than that in the rest of these games. Like, seriously, 16 turnovers. That's just way too many. So while Indiana struggled over the weekend, Purdue did not. I mean, it's incredible. I'm out here talking basketball 101 with Indiana. Don't turn the basketball over. Meanwhile, Purdue's just rolling. Absolutely rolling. Okay, they beat Rutgers in what was a Braden Smith masterclass. Okay, the best point guard in the Big Ten, maybe the best player in the Big Ten. I mean, if you go back and you watch that game against Rutgers, I was super excited for it because it's Dylan Harper, a guy who's super talented, going to be a lottery pick, all those things. Taking on a guy in Braden Smith who's just super experienced, and all the experience of being in Purdue's system was on display against Rutgers for Braden Smith. Okay, he had 14 assists in that game, which is that's an incredible amount of assists for a college basketball player to have in a game. He also scored 16 points. Purdue didn't shoot it well, but it didn't matter because they locked in defensively. They got stops, and Braden Smith really just controlled the game offensively. And then yesterday, they come back home to Mackey, and they play Nebraska. And Nebraska's a good team. Like, I like watching Nebraska play. I think they're very well coached. They're not super talented. Like, they clearly miss Tamanaga, but they are by no means a bad team. And Purdue took them out behind the woodshed and just beat the absolute dog crap out of them. I mean, they won 104-68. They won by 36 points. 36. That's what you do to, mid-major teams that are going to finish, last in their conference. Okay, you don't do that to other teams in your conference. That's just 104-68 is just absolutely insane. Braden Smith had 14 assists again, which is once again just an insane number from a point guard in the Big Ten. I think that was just a test. As I was saying, Braden Smith just shooting, or just dishing the ball out at a high level. Purdue scoring a whole bunch of points. Purdue shot 58% from 3. Look, if you shoot the ball out well, you're not going to lose to anybody. They shot 19 of 33 from beyond the arc. First off, that's a really high number of threes to take, and that's a really high number of threes to make. I mean, that's just that's just an incredible number. Geez, I'm trying to do math on that. Yeah, that's 57 points. They almost beat Nebraska just on their 3-point shots alone. It's just 58% from 3 is just absurd. And then they shot 61% from the floor overall, which is also an incredibly insane number. And then you look at Nebraska, who didn't shoot it well at all, 6 of 27 from 3. That's 22%. They were outscored by 39 from beyond the 3-point line. As a whole, they shot 48% from the floor, which is normally good enough. If you shoot 48% from the floor and you play good defense and you don't turn the ball over, then that's usually enough to give yourself a chance. But yesterday, it was not, because Purdue was just absolutely unconscious from 3. Just 58% from 3 is just it's an insane number, an absolutely insane number. Tonight, the NFL playoffs continue. We got the Vikings taking on the Rams, and I can't wait for this game. I'm super intrigued to see what's going to happen. Vegas has the Vikings favored by 2.5 with the over/under set at 47.5. And I can tell you right now, who's going to win this game? I'm going to take the Rams. And look, as people talk about the playoffs and everything else that kind of comes with it, there's going to be a major focus on all this other stuff. They're going to talk about defenses and all these other things, which is great. Defense is important. Defense is cool. All that kind of stuff. But ultimately, it's about who's playing quarterback. Like, it just is. Like, when you go through all of the games that we had over the weekend, the better quarterback won every single game except for one. Every single game except for one. Okay. I would argue Justin Herbert's better than CJ Stroud. Texans won that game. Okay. That's the only game where the better quarterback lost. Okay. The Steelers, they lost to the Ravens. Russell Wilson, not as good as Lamar Jackson. The Broncos get crushed by the Bills. Bo Nix, good, really good, solid rookie season, but not as good as Josh Allen. Sorry. The Packers lose to the Eagles. Jordan Love, super talented, nowhere near as consistent as, Jalen Hurts has been. Okay. So better quarterback won there. The Commanders beat the Buccaneers. Jaden Daniels, better quarterback. Guess who won that game? The Commanders. It's really, impressive. Just watching, what they do. John Buzzard chiming in with some thoughts on Purdue. Really great point here. He's talking about when Purdue was playing non-SEC and Marquette teams, Big Ten teams have not learned to pressure guards on high dribble handoffs and ball screens, doubling Braden so he can't pass over defenders. Nebraska didn't do that. Yeah, I'm really curious if part of that is just because, this is, I wonder if the Big Ten has the athletes at guard to be able to do that. Like, Illinois is pretty athletic. I wonder if we'll see them do that. But, like, the thing is, when you're playing Auburn and Marquette and these super athletic teams at the guard spot, like, they just actually have the guys to do that. To be fair, I haven't seen a ton of Nebraska. I just don't know if they have the athletes at the guard position to do that. But not Buzzard. I think that's an excellent point, because that's been the weakness of Purdue all year, right? Like, they aren't super athletic, and like, playing good basketball and doing those things is good, and it's important, like knowing how to move the ball and shooting the ball well. But ultimately, like, it's really nice when you have guards who can just go score and guards who can go and get a shot without needing a ball screen. And Braden Smith's awesome. Love watching his game. He's gotten so much better. I don't know. The Big Ten just doesn't look like the SEC. I think that's part of it. Back to the playoffs tonight, we got Rams and Vikings. And, kind of as I was saying, just the importance of the quarterback position, just really groundbreaking stuff here right now. Is just, yeah, anyway, I find it funny. Tonight, like, I don't know how you don't take Matthew Stafford and Sean McVay at home. I don't know how that's not the bet. Okay, I get it. The Vikings have been a lot of fun this year. They've really kind of come out of nowhere, right? Amazing what finding a good quarterback does. They go 14-3. They lose to the Lions twice. Their other loss, I think, I don't know who their other loss to was, but like, you look at their losses, they're not bad. They've mainly beaten good teams. But you look at the Rams and it's like, they're healthy. It's Sean McVay. It's Matthew Stafford, well-rested. Cooper Kupp, well-rested. Puka Nacua, well-rested, so on and so forth. And they're playing this Vikings team that is good. Like, they've got great receivers, and Justin Jefferson, the Addison kid, is really good as well. It's just the Vikings defense I'm just not sold on, especially playing against a very experienced quarterback in Matthew Stafford, who's going to sit back there and be like, all right, like, this is cute. You got 8 guys up at the line of scrimmage. That's awesome. But I know exactly what they're all going to do. So this is actually problematic for you. And so, that's the thing with the Vikings that kind of has me concerned. Plus, like, it's Sean McVay. Like, you could make a pretty decent argument that he's the best coach in the NFL. Okay. And, Kevin O'Connell has done an excellent job. Kevin O'Connell, a Sean McVay disciple, actually. So we've got a great matchup of coaches, but I just trust the Rams a little bit more. I trust Matthew Stafford more than I trust Sam Darnold. At the end of the day, like, when the line's this close, 2.5, I'm just going to take the team with the better quarterback, right? That's what we saw happen last night between Commanders and Buccaneers. Jaden Daniels is better than Baker Mayfield, and the Commanders won on what was a pretty narrow line. It's really funny. Like, a lot of these wild card games haven't been close. Texans blow out the Chargers. Ravens blow out the Steelers, Bills blow out the Broncos, Eagles blow out the Packers, Commanders, Buccaneers was the only close game. And all these college football fans or talking heads are chiming in like, should these teams have been invited? Is the playoff too big? The playoff is too big. There's way too many teams in the NFL playoffs. The fact that you can go 10-7, which is, one loss away from 500, right? Because if you lose one game, then you're 9-8, and that's pretty average. The fact that you can go 10-7 and make the playoffs to me is really insane. I think that playoffs across all sports would be better if we lessened the number of teams that got in. Like the fact that, like the NBA, they put 8 teams in, but if you finish in the top 10, so if you're one of the top 20 teams in the league, like you have a chance, because if you're, the 10 seed, then you have, the playing games or you have an opportunity to fight your way in. I find it to be incredibly dumb. And the fact that, basically half the NFL gets into the playoffs, I think is insane as well. The fact you can go 10-7 and make the playoffs and not win your division is pretty incredible to me. Like it is. I don't understand it, but hey, I get it. More games, more money, all those things. People are watching, so why are we complaining? All that good stuff. When we come back here in about 5 minutes or so, Zach Hicks of Locked On Colts, he's going to join. We're going to talk more about the Chris Ballard presser. What does competition at the quarterback position look like? All that kind of stuff. Zach Hicks of Locked On Colts is set to join me here in about 5 minutes.
It's time for the real Jonathan Smith Show. This is Indy Sports Ticket 1430 AM, 93.9 HD2, and always on the free Indy Sports Ticket app.
Look at that. The intro actually played that time. Oh, it's such a lovely intro. Anyway, this is the real Jonathan Smith Show here on Indy Sports Ticket. Hopefully you had a nice weekend. Hopefully, you watched some nice, good, competent football from some teams. It was a nice break, not having to watch the Colts crap all over themselves. Joining me now, Zach Hicks of Locked On Colts, joining me to talk about Chris Ballard's comments last week on Friday. Zach, what's going on, man?
Not much, man. Just enjoying the off season. It's such a treat covering the Colts where there's no stress during the playoffs. I can just relax, get into my off season mode, wear sweatpants everywhere I go. It's just nice getting into the off season mode already.
That's the best thing about radio. I wear sweatpants every day. My wife is jealous because she teaches. She has to wear she can't even wear jeans. I'm just I'm sorry, but anyway. What were some of your bigger takeaways from everything that Chris Ballard had to say during his press conference on Friday?
Yeah, I think the biggest takeaway is this guy is so good at speaking. I think everyone's pretty much done with Chris Ballard at this point. Even his most ardent fans are like, you know what, it's probably time to move on. Outside of Jim Irsay, everyone kind of thought it was time to move on from Chris Ballard. And we all joke throughout the week about how he's going to say this, how they're close, and how he trusts his guys, and how his process works. And if this process doesn't work, then it'll get him fired, and so be it. And we made jokes on the show last week talking about what he would say, and I don't think he really hit on many of the cliches that we expected. He did still have his typical vernacular with the looks and all those things in there, but it was a very different press conference from Chris Ballard in terms of, in the past, when he had press conferences like this, it would be like, yeah, I made mistakes here and that's on me, but I had some wins here. You guys doubted me on this. And he would be kind of sassy with the media and kind of pushing back on some of the criticism in the past. This one was an angry press conference. It was we're not close. It was, in a lot of ways, calling out a lot of players without saying their names, obviously, but calling out a lot of the players on his team, and really acknowledging his mistakes without really highlighting any wins that he had. It was a very, very different Chris Ballard press conference. I will say this, though, about Chris Ballard. He knows how to say the right things all the time. He's always been like this. Even last year, when he was getting a little chippy with the media and stuff like that about some of his wins and losses, at the time it sounded like the right thing, and then it resulted in a really bad offseason for the Colts and ultimately their step back this season. So obviously actions speak louder than words, and that's really my biggest takeaway is you can say all the right things right now about how you're going to be more aggressive in free agency, how you're going to add more competition to the roster, how you need to change what you're doing and calling out certain players. But if you just go back and resort back to your typical ways, everything you just said is moot. So as of right now, he said all the right things. And this isn't me trying to be a big Chris Ballard supporter, but it's look, he's here whether we like it or not. So we have to be objective about how we analyze what he's doing and what he's saying. So there's no reason to not give him a shot to back up what he's saying, because he's going to be here regardless. And we'll see if his actions line up with his words from the press conference. But as of right now, I think he did a good job with what he said, but let's back it up this offseason. Let's bring in more competition. Let's bring in more free agents. Let's, make this roster better, rather than just sitting, resting on our laurels like he does all the time. So again, he said all the right things, but now the next step is actually backing that up.
Joined by Zach Hicks of Locked On Colts. You can listen to that wherever you get your podcasts. I'm entirely with you. Like you said, he's very good at knowing what to say. He apparently was a keynote speaker at a PR conference earlier this year. So
okay, there we go.
He knows what to say. And I'm entirely with you. It's you can talk about bringing in competition and all this kind of stuff, but until you actually do it, I am not going to believe you. You don't get the benefit of the doubt in year 9. You don't. How likely do you think Chris Ballard is to actually follow through on these things?
I don't see him being a big player in free agency in terms of what we see from Jacksonville every offseason, where Jacksonville is signing the top 5 free agents every offseason and they still don't get better. I don't think they're going to do that. But I think we could see him maybe go back to like how he was. I mean, look, we're very down on Chris Ballard at this point, but I think at least most people, most rational people, if they can separate the emotional part of their brain from it, like from 2017 to like 2020, he was a good GM. He was a good GM for this Colts team. Had a lot of massive hits in the draft, and then all the free agents he brought in. I mean, Danico Autry, Justin Houston, Phillip Rivers, and I mean, like Eric Fisher wasn't like a super positive one, but I mean, it helped Jonathan Taylor have that great season in 2021. Like he had some really big hits. Chris Reed was a small one. Rodney McLeod, Stephon Gilmore. Like these were really, really big free agent hits for this Colts team. And he was a legitimately good general manager when he was using that stuff. Yeah, we wanted him to be a little bit more active still. And there were some ways that he could have been better, but he was a big part of the Colts' relative success from 2017 to 2020. I mean, they made the playoffs twice in 4 years, and one of those years was a tear-it-all-down year in 2017, and the other one was the surprise luck retirement. But since then, he's been very complacent. He's relied too much on his drafted players to become the veterans that he used to sign in free agency, and he hasn't really used the free agent aspect of the offseason since then. So if he can just get back to what he was in 2018, 2019, 2020 with free agency, where, you know, you take a couple shots. I mean, like the Eric Ebron shot they took back in the day that worked out for them for at least 1 year. You know, it worked out really well for them. Danico Autry, again, like we're not asking him to go out there and sign like the top 5 free agents but like just bring in like 6-7 guys that can be either high quality backups or like solid starters to compete with the roster and make guys better. I mean, that's literally all we've been asking for years now with him come every free agency. Instead, we just get like Raekwon Davis and Joe Flacco signings the last couple of years. So I think it's possible to see him to get back to that 2018, 2019, 2020 like range of what he was in free agency. But I don't know, man. Again, like it's been so long since then. We haven't really seen him be active in free agency in 2+ years at this point. So I got to see it to believe it, but I do think it's possible. Like I've seen him do it before. It's just, will he actually close the deals? Like he mentioned in his press conference, like he's great at identifying free agents that he wants to sign, but if they're just not closing the deals, it's like, look, take that extra step and close these deals. Like that's all we're asking at this point. Cause he clearly has an eye for free agency. He brings in a lot of hits in free agency, maybe not a kicker, but like other positions. He hits in free agency at other positions. So like, just trust the process. And if you have to go an extra $1 million per year to lock these guys up, so be it. Like, get rid of that hard line that you draw, be aggressive in free agency, get these guys in the building and make your team better. Like that's all we are asking here. And I think it's very possible that he could do it. It's just, again, I got to see it, man. I really got to see it to believe it with him.
Joined by Zach Hicks, host of Locked on Colts, talking Chris Ballard and everything that he said on Friday. Yeah, I'm with you. I got to see it to believe it. And I think I really like what you said. Like, we don't need him to go out and sign the 5 best free agents. We just need like a little bit of depth. You know, like 2 offensive linemen got hurt, and the Colts offensive line was shambles is probably a bit dramatic, but like there was a pretty noticeable drop off. Like there needs to be more depth there. They need a backup running back behind Jonathan Taylor. You know, the receiver position is fine, but like defensively, like if Nick Cross or Julian Blackman had gotten hurt, like that would have spelled major issues. Whoops, that's loud.
Hey, Julian Blackman was hurt this year. That's the crazy
right.
part. Julian Blackman had a torn labrum he played through since week 1 or week 2, whatever it was. Played through the whole season, but let's be honest, him playing through a torn labrum was probably still their second best safety on the team, and he wasn't good. That speaks to the depth on the team. So yeah, I'm completely with you. Like he doesn't need to be the Xavier McKinney that he went after last year. Like it doesn't have to be Xavier McKinney. Just bring in like a Rodney McLeod level safety to compete. And if he ends up being the starter, so be it. Rodney McLeod was awesome for the Colts in 2021. So yeah, that's all we're asking. Like these are not even big contracts. McLeod was like on like a 1 year, like $2 million contract, and was a A+ signing. Chris Reed was a great depth player years ago, and he was on like a vet minimum. I think he was under $1 million per year, and was an awesome backup player for them. Like it doesn't have to be big signings, but just bring in quality guys. And if they don't work out, cut them. Like, whatever, just bring in the competition.
Yeah, you have to push guys, make them better. Everything that Buckner said, I think is incredibly true. For me, the most interesting thing that Chris Ballard said, once again joined by Zach Hicks of Locked On Colts, was he talked about competition in the quarterback room, bringing someone in to challenge Anthony Richardson. And for me, this is what I opened my show with. Kirk Cousins, Aaron Rodgers, any other older veteran is not the competition that I think that the Colts need. I am of the opinion that they should draft a quarterback this year. Probably not Shedeur Sanders or Cam Ward because those are picks 1 and 2. But if they took a Quinn Ewers or a Jackson Dart in round 2 or 3, I would be in pretty large favor of that. I think just looking at this year's draft class and even previous guys, I think that there's a lot of correlation between a lot of reps in college, making it just an easier transition to the NFL. That's what you get in Quinn Ewers and Jackson Dart, 2 guys who have played a lot of football. And my other thing is, like, if you bring in Aaron Rodgers, like, he could probably retire at the end of the year. So, like, how big of a threat really is that for Richardson? I'm of the opinion that they should draft someone this year. What are kind of your thoughts on that? And what do you think competition in the quarterback room looks like?
Yeah, I mean, to tackle the topic at hand, I mean, the Colts need to bring in someone capable of playing on Sundays regardless, if it's for competition or as a backup, because, I mean, the fact of the matter is Anthony Richardson has played in less than half of the games that have been available to him in his first 2 years of being in the NFL. And I hate to say it, like, I pushed back on the narrative last year on him being injury prone, but now that I have another year of data, I feel like we can kind of say that there is an injury issue here with Anthony Richardson. It's not just the one fluke injury to the throwing shoulder. Now it's also the hip injury. It's also the back injury. There was a concussion last year as well. Like, who knows what else is going to come in the future. So regardless of what you are doing, like, competition wise at quarterback, you need somebody that's capable of playing on Sunday, whether that's a Joe Flacco type or a draft pick kid, like, whatever. They need somebody that can play on Sundays. In regards to competition, I'm with you. I do think, I don't think like an Aaron Rodgers or a Kirk Cousins really pushes him too much. So I would rather it be like a younger person, maybe someone like a Justin Fields if the price tag isn't too crazy. And that could be advantageous for Fields too, because you get into an offense that wants to use the QB run game. You think, hey, if you think anything of yourself, you think you could maybe beat out Richardson in camp, or if not, you'll still get a chance to play because Richardson probably won't play all 17. So that could be a pretty advantageous situation for like a guy like Fields, or maybe a former top draft pick who's looking for, that second chance, like a Zach Wilson or a Mac Jones. I'm not advocating for those 2 guys. I'm just saying, like, for those 2 guys in particular, they could work. Yeah, I'm not advocating. I'm just saying the second chance thing is a big thing right now in the NFL, and those guys could see this as their second chance. When it comes to the draft, I mean, the only pushback you're going to get from me here is please don't take Quinn Ewers. I can't watch Quinn Ewers again.
Really?
AD Mitchell might. I do not like Quinn Ewers at all, man.
Why not?
Do it. So last draft season, I was big on Xavier Worthy, and then obviously I had to watch a lot of AD Mitchell in that draft season last year. And I felt like I was watching like the worst possible version of Derek Carr in college. And I was like, this is so bad. It was just, I love Sarkisian's offense too. And I think Ewers can run it fine, but I don't know. I don't like him. I don't like him at all. It's like my hatred of Drew Aller as well at Penn State. Like, those are just the 2 college quarterbacks that I'm like, you guys are way too talented to just to let me down so much whenever I watch you play.
That's funny.
I think Ewers could be like a fine, like, late day 2, early day 3 type option for the Colts. I think also because Sarkisian's offense does play fairly similar to Shane Steichen's, like, schematically. So I could see Steichen liking a Quinn Ewers. Jackson Dart, though, I think that's a fun one to throw in there. He is a psychopath. I love him. He is so much fun. Like, he will throw his body on the line for anything. He'll talk smack all game. I don't know how great he's going to be in the NFL, maybe like a high-level backup or something, but he's a fun player. I'm glad you mentioned him. I'm a huge fan of just how crazy that dude is. I saw him putting his hood up after games and, like, not talking. Like, he's crazy. But yeah, I mean, it's not a great QB class in general. Like, you maybe have 2 first-round picks in Ward and Sanders. They look like they're going to be the first-round picks. I don't think you have any others. And then the hit rate on day 2 quarterbacks is really bad. Like, it's atrocious in NFL history. So, I mean, we'll see if they want to go that route. I could see them going multiple routes. So I think it'll be a free agent signing because this team just has too many holes to take a quarterback on day 2. So I think it'll be like a free agent signing, like a Fields or maybe if Steichen wants to go more with a pocket passer as his backup, like a Mac Jones type. Again, not Mac Jones. Mac Jones type could work as the backup there, but they'll certainly bring somebody in. I mean, it might be Joe Flacco again. Who knows? But
I hope
they'll bring
not.
somebody in. Yeah, I don't want it to be Flacco either, but we'll see who it is.
Joined by Zach Hicks of Locked On Colts, talking about what competition in the quarterback room looks like. Jackson Dart, look, he played for Ole Miss. I can't stand Ole Miss. I don't know, man. If you play for Lane Kiffin, I feel like something's just wrong with you.
There's something wrong with him. He's psycho, man. You watch him play. I saw him get hit in the head in one of these games and the helmet fly off, and I'm like, this guy's clearly concussed. And then he got a taunting penalty when his helmet flew off because he ran and was talking smack to the defender. And I'm like, you know what? Don't want that in my quarterback, but I love it in my quarterback. Like, it's cool.
Yeah,
it's cool. He's psycho.
He's got some Baker to him. Some Baker Mayfield.
Yeah, he's got some Baker. I think it's a good comp.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like Quinn Ewers because I see the talent. There's just, like you said, there's some instances where it's like, this isn't great, but I do think that the talent's there. The other thing, and you mentioned this 2025 class of quarterbacks not being great. And because of that, I've already seen it a couple times. I hate this idea. I opened my show with it. I hate the idea of tanking for Arch Manning. I hate this idea with an absolute passion, Zach, because, and like, that we're going to see it as we get closer to the season and draft and all that. The idea of tanking for Arch Manning is going to get thrown out there because it's a great story, Zach. I love great stories. I read all the time. Okay. But I don't care about great stories when it comes to like my football team being good. I think like, why are we going to tank for a guy that we've seen throw 95 passes in his college career? Okay. They took a guy in Anthony Richardson who barely threw 300 passes, which is probably where Arch Manning is going to wind up at the end of the year. Okay. And I get it. He's Peyton Manning's nephew and great story, all that kind of stuff. I hate this idea so much. If, the Colts were like, we're going to tank for Arch, which I don't think is going to happen because in theory, Shane Steichen and Chris Ballard's jobs are going to be on the line this next year. So I don't think tanking's really on the table. I guess, how would you kind of feel about that?
Yeah. So to first address the tanking thing, tanking's not really a thing in the NFL. Like, yes, there are times where owners and general managers tear down a team to rebuild it up, like the Colts in 2017, the Colts in 2011 after Peyton Manning's injury. Like, you could call those tanking because of the talent they're putting on the field. But as long as you're putting, like, the guys you're putting on the field and the head coach that's running the talent, none of them are tanking. Like, none of those guys are involved in tanking. Head coaches have a lifespan of maybe 2 years in the NFL, maybe 3. And players have a shorter lifespan. Players have a 1.5 year lifespan in the NFL. Like, these guys are not tanking when you put them on the field. So unless the Colts tear down every aspect of the roster, they're not going to be tanking enough. Now, we could see a situation where Richardson gets hurt, whoever the backup is gets hurt, Sam Ehlinger's starting a whole season, and they naturally tank because Ehlinger's just not an NFL quarterback. You could see something like that. But for the most part, no, tanking is not really a thing unless it's from the GM and owner, like re-tearing down an entire roster. Players on the field are always competing. And we saw with the Giants, like, Giants had no reason to kick the Colts' butt late in the season, but the coach and the players don't care about that stuff. They care about winning. So they went out there and won that game. In regards to Arch Manning, yeah, I'm with you. Like, look, I think he looks promising. His 95 passes, he's only thrown a couple passes. They look pretty good. Like, honestly, I hate Quinn Ewers so much in college that I think that he's the better quarterback on that team. Because I'm a hater. I'm an absolute hater. But to say that you're going to tank this much, that you should tank a whole season for a kid who's not even started yet. He's only thrown a couple passes against a real opponent in college. I think he threw a couple passes in that Georgia game in their first matchup. Like, come on, we got to actually see what he can do, before we're saying tank. And I know a lot of it's a story thing. It's like with the trade up for Marvin Harrison Jr. that everybody was trying to say last draft season. It's like, guys, the amount of draft capital you give up to move up for him, heck, they could have drafted a better receiver at 15 if they just took Brian Thomas Jr.
Yeah.
Like there's no reason to trade up for a receiver in this economy, with how every draft is producing like 5 or 6 starting receivers, at a minimum. So it's like, you gotta take the emotion out of it a little bit. It's hard to say that to fans because, I mean, a big part of the word fandom is fanaticism, being a fanatic towards your team. So you love the stories, you love the lore and the connections and stuff like that. It's a lot like our grandmas watching their soap operas, like they get their stories and stuff. This is what ours is. This is our soap opera, is watching the NFL and the stories and all the heartfelt moments and stuff. So I totally get the emotional aspect, but let's see what Arch Manning can do before we start screaming for that. I will say he looks like the most promising prospect for next year's draft in 2026, but he's far from the point where you're going to say you're going to tank for him. I mean, if we think about guys going into their draft year in the last few years, like Drake May going into his draft season was already like a 4,000-yard passer and stuff like that in college. Caleb Williams had multiple years under his belt of really high-level play and a Heisman under his belt, I believe, at that point. C.J. Stroud was tearing it up for Ohio State as a redshirt freshman. So there were other quarterbacks that were on a higher trajectory prior to, their final season, and they weren't giving the hype that Arch Manning's getting. A lot of that is because of his last name. That Manning name carries a lot of weight. So I want to see what he can do out there. I'm excited for him. I think he can be a good college quarterback and be a good prospect, maybe even the first overall pick. But yeah, the tank for Arch Manning is a little premature, I think, right now. We'll see what he can do next season. He's set up for success, at least. He really is set up for success, and I hope he is successful. I very, very much doubt he'll be an Indianapolis Colt.
Yeah, that's exactly how I feel as well. Joined by Zach Hicks of Locked On Colts. And to your point about how teams don't tank, so I grew up, still am to a certain extent, a Miami Dolphins fan, and I just remember the 2020 season. They got rid of everybody. And Brian Flores, because he's a good head coach, still figured out a way to win 5 games. They still got to draft Tua, and that has not turned out very well. So, I mean, like, even if you do tank and you draft whoever you want, like, it doesn't always end up great. Like, I think one of my favorite segments I've ever done is I went back over the last 20 years and I looked at the hit rate of quarterbacks in the first round. About like 20% of them end up being like superstars, your Mahomes, Allen, Lamar. About 25% are like good, solid starters. And then the other 55% are busts. All right. So like it doesn't always pan out, but I am very intrigued to see what they wind up doing, to see who they bring in to back up and hopefully challenge Anthony Richardson a little bit. Last thing, and I'll let you go. Colts have started interviewing guys for that defensive coordinator slot. They interviewed the Browns guy on Saturday. They're interviewing Dennis Allen, Lou Anarumo, the guy that I really want. And there's another guy in there too, I believe. Who do you want? What are kind of your thoughts on how the search is going?
Yeah, I think the search has been interesting so far because in the past, I feel like we saw a lot of people that Chris Ballard would typically covet. And when I say that, like, when I think of a Chris Ballard candidate for defensive coordinator, it's a guy who, he's a little diverse in his fronts, but typically going to be from that cover 2, cover 3 type of scheme that he was born and raised in, essentially with the Chicago Bears in the first like decade and a half of his career. That was what he was around. He got close to Lovie Smith and all those other coaches that were on those famous Bears teams back then. And he got close to that tree. So that's why, he was so big on hiring Matt Eberflus his first time. He got Gus Bradley because that was the next evolution of that tree with the cover 3 that Gus Bradley ran. So he liked to stick to that tree. And aside from Steve Wilks, worked on that Bears staff back in the day. He actually overlapped with Shane Steichen a little bit too early in his career. But aside from Steve Wilks, the other 3 guys that they've interviewed or going to interview are not really from that tree. And when I look at especially Dennis Allen and Lou Anarumo, those are 2 guys that I feel like were very much Shane Steichen calls to come in and interview. Because when I think about what Shane Steichen wants, Steichen certainly wants more of a veteran coach on the other side with him. He wants a veteran guy that can take control of the whole defense. And that way he can mostly concern himself with offense. Like, he's obviously the head coach. He's going to be involved with defense, but I think I'd be shocked if the Colts hired a first-time defensive coordinator as their guy, because I think that Steichen wants more of that veteran leadership on that side of the ball. So I think he's interested in both Allen and Anarumo because of their past success. And also, he's really struggled with those two guys in his career, especially with the Colts. I mean, you look at his 1.5 games against the Bengals. I'll call it 1.5 because one was the preseason game this year, but the Colts had their starters against the Bengals in the preseason this year, and they struggled with the Bengals backups with the Colts starting offense. And then I think they had the joint practices. I think there was one joint practice too, so we got a close-up look at that. And then you go to 2023, and I think the Bengals held them to, I want to say 10 points in that game. And Steichen's offense just looks so defunct that entire game against Anarumo. And then you go to Dennis Allen. Dennis Allen's been a thorn in Steichen's side for a couple of years. He's had some good point outputs against him, but the last 2 games against them have been kind of struggles with Gardner Minshew as a starting quarterback. So I think those are the 2 guys he probably covets the most, and why the Colts were so aggressive at bringing them in for interviews early is because Steichen wants a veteran coach that he has struggled with in the past. And those guys really make some sense there. Now, I don't know how likely they are because, I mean, Anarumo is going to be very sought out by other coaches. And I think Dennis Allen has connections to Ben Johnson and Aaron Glenn, who are both getting head coaching interviews. So we'll see if Allen wants to connect himself to one of those 2 guys. But I do think they're both very high-quality candidates. I've actually seen a lot of pushback from Colts fans about Lou Anarumo. And I don't think his overall body of work is like perfect by any means, but I do think recency bias kind of hurts his case in terms of like, this guy was the main reason the Bengals were in the Super Bowl. Like, he was almost the biggest reason why the Bengals were in the Super Bowl. I mean, people don't remember Joe Burrow was not that good in that playoff run.
Yeah.
He was like below average that entire playoffs, but Anarumo's defense was holding opposing teams like 20 points a game. And I think they were averaging like almost 2 turnovers a game on defense, had multiple takeaways against Pat Mahomes in the second half of that comeback win in the AFC Championship game. I mean, Anarumo's a really good coach. So I'd be cool with any of these 4. I've talked myself into all 4 of them. I do like all 4 of them to a degree. But yeah, either Dennis Allen or Lou Anarumo, I think, would be my favorite and one of the 2 guys that I would prefer if the Colts can land them.
Yeah, joined by Zach Hicks of Locked On Colts, talking about who the Colts are going to hire as their next defensive coordinator. The thing that people have to remember about Lou is, like, the Bengals got rid of a lot of their good defensive pieces this last offseason. That's why they really struggled on defense this year. Like, you can be a mastermind, but like, if you don't have good players, then like, good luck. And then the other thing with Dennis Allen is, I'm just a firm believer that bad coordinators usually don't get hired as head coaches. And so, like, because like, I think we see this all the time where, Dan Quinn gets fired from the Falcons. He lands with the Cowboys. All of a sudden, the Cowboys defense was really good. Mike Zimmer, right? Is it Zimmer or is it Zimmerman? The guy who got fired? Zimmer, yeah.
Mike Zimmer.
He gets fired. He ends up in Dallas. When Dallas was healthy, like, they had a really good defense this year. Like, I like, that is just kind of the pattern. Like, wherever Robert Saleh winds up, their defense is going to be really good, and because he's amazing. But yeah, those are one of the 2 guys that I want. I really hope we get one of them. Like you said, Lou Anarumo is going to be very, very sought after. Dennis Allen with ties to other places. So what we really need is for Ben Johnson to be like, you know what, I'm going to stay in Detroit for one more year. I think
yep.
That'd be very
that's
helpful.
The thing I've heard is I think Ben Johnson would which actually would be funny because it seems like Ben Johnson is most likely to take the Raiders offer, which is like the most buzz that we're getting right now. And that would be hilarious for Dennis Allen to return to the Raiders after that was where his first head coach stint was at. So maybe if Johnson picks the Raiders, it makes it a no-go. Like maybe Allen was on bad terms with the ownership there or something. But yeah, it does seem like Allen would maybe go with Ben Johnson. That would be the concern. But aside from that, I mean, yeah, I think Allen and Anarumo are both really good candidates. I mean, even Wilkes to a degree. It would kind of be a lot of the same of what they've run the last couple of years, but it'd be like a more aggressive version. And Wilkes is a great leader by all accounts too. So I do think that'd be an interesting one. They got good candidates. I think they'll even interview a couple more as well. So it should be really interesting next couple of days to see who they end up with.
Man, let it be the mad scientist. Let it be Lou Anarumo. That's really who I want. Zach, thanks for your time. As always, man, you were great all season. I don't think there's any other Colts stuff happening. So If this is the last time I have you on for a while, man, like you've been great all year.
I appreciate it, man. Maybe we'll after we get back here for like free agency and stuff, we can talk about how Ballard didn't sign anybody or how he signed like me to play kicker or something. Then we'll jump back on here and talk.
Sounds good. Sounds good. Thanks for your time, man.
All right. See ya.
That is Zach Hicks. Check him out on Twitter at Zach Hicks2. Check out his podcast, Locked On Colts. He does an excellent job covering everything with them. When we come back here in about 4 minutes or so, Tyrese Haliburton, Pacer star, got hurt again. My thoughts on that here in about 4 minutes.
The best takes. The real Jonathan Smith Show. This is Indy Sports Ticket 1430 AM, 93.9 HD2, and always on the free Indy Sports Ticket app.
What's going on? The real Jonathan Smith Show here on Indy Sports Ticket. Hopefully you've had a nice weekend. Hopefully you enjoyed watching all of the playoff football stress-free because the Colts once again are bad at football. Maybe you're just like an Indianapolis only guy or girl, I guess, and you just only watch your Indianapolis sports teams. And so you watch the Pacers beat the Cleveland Cavaliers on the road, the team with the best record in the NBA, not the best team in the NBA. That title belongs to the Oklahoma City Thunder. But anyway, the Pacers went in there and they won. They beat the Cleveland Cavaliers. And man, I was really, excited. I was going to get on here and be like, look at that. Pacers hold the best offense in the NBA to 93 points. Or, Jarris Walker, outstanding game, led the Pacers in plus minus, led them in rebounding, watch out, all that kind of stuff. That's what I thought I'd get to talk about. But then in the first half, Tyrese Haliburton was like, I didn't stretch, and now my hamstring hurts. Come on, man. Like, the Pacers have this huge medical staff. You had problems with your hamstring last year. It's like, can you stretch just like a little bit more? Like, can you do something? Can you do like Theragun your hamstrings, like when you're on the bench, just something to keep them active? Okay, because this is the second time that we know of that he has hurt his hamstring. Like Tyrese Haliburton, man, like when you get up in the morning, touch your toes a couple times, right? Like just stretch, be ready to go. And it's reportedly just tightness, but still, anytime something happens to your hamstring, it takes forever for players to come back from that. Like it's a major issue for Haliburton. Like this is, the second time in as many years that he has hurt his hamstring in January. And, the Pacers were rolling. Like this is just really more of anything, a very frustrating moment from the Pacers and from Haliburton. Like, take care of yourself, man. Like, stretch. Let's go. It's not hard. And, I guess on the bright side of things, Kevin Pritchard and this front office have done an outstanding job of building this roster. Like, Tyrese Haliburton didn't play in the second half, and the Pacers absolutely rolled in the second half, outscoring the Cleveland Cavaliers 68-40. Okay, I mean, just outscoring by 28 without their best player. And that speaks to the depth that, the Pacers have built up over, these past couple of seasons. I just saw a stat where basically it highlights, the players with the best net ratings in the NBA when they're on the floor versus off the floor. And Andrew Nembhard was second on that list. The Pacers are 17 points better with Andrew Nembhard on the floor versus when he's off the floor, which, once again speaks to the depth that the Pacers have built up. And, we saw it last night. They played 10 guys, which is a lot. And once again, Aaron Nesmith is hurt. He has not played. Okay. And, part of that was garbage time. Johnny Furphy only played 3 minutes. So they played 9 guys, would have been 10 if Aaron Nesmith was healthy, which hopefully he's able to come back soon. And the depth of this team is going to keep them afloat. Their upcoming, schedule is not super crazy, right? Like, there's a couple weird games just because they're in Paris. They're going to play the Spurs over there, which is insane. That sounds terrible. Those are going to be pro Spurs crowds the whole way. But, so like they've got some winnable games coming up. And if they defend the way that they defended last night, they will be fine. Once again, they held the best offensive team in the NBA to 93 points, right? And it was because their defensive intensity was just at a really high level, just a really impressive effort from them rotating the shooters. And part of why they were so much better defensively is because Tyrese Haliburton didn't play in the second half when you're running Andrew Nembhard, who's a really good defender, and Benedict Mathurin out there, who's become a pretty good defender. Like, you're going to be better defensively than when you run Haliburton out there, or when it's TJ McConnell and Andrew Nembhard, or TJ McConnell and Benedict Mathurin. Like, you're just going to be defensively at the point of attack. And so that's part of why they won. That's another reason why I think they'll be fine while, Tyrese Haliburton is in, not therapy, but rehab, trying to just improve and be better. So they're going to be fine while he's out. He just needs to get healthy. because if the Pacers want to make a run in the playoffs, they have to have him. He is their best player. He was one of the 15 best players in the league last year, third team all NBA. Like, they need him in the playoffs and in those spots. But as of right now, their depth and this lighter schedule coming up should hopefully help them stay afloat while he's out fixing his hamstring tightness. Just stretch, man. I don't feel like I'm asking for a lot here. When we come back here in about 4 minutes or so, Indiana blown out on the road on Saturday night. Purdue blew out Nebraska at home yesterday. My thoughts on those two games and those two programs when we come back here in about 4 minutes.
Unfiltered takes live here. The real Jonathan Smith Show. This is Indy Sports Ticket 1430 AM, 93.9 HD2, and always on the free Indy Sports Ticket app.
The real Jonathan Smith Show here on Indy's Sports Ticket. Hopefully you had a nice weekend of watching stress-free football because once again, the Indianapolis Colts suck at football. In addition to the Colts not playing and that being disappointing, if you're an Indiana fan, you're also disappointed because they got clapped by the Iowa Hawkeyes. Okay, and because it's IU and IU fans are crazy, you're probably going to react in a really big way. Oh no, we got crushed by by a basketball team that can really score, and we suck, and fire Mike Woodson and all that kind of stuff. Just come on, it's one game. Okay, sometimes you have nights where you don't shoot the ball well. And it's not good when that night is against Iowa because Iowa's been the best offensive team in the Big Ten so far this year. They lead the Big Ten in scoring. They lead the Big Ten in three-point shooting percentage. They can shoot it. They run a really good offense, as they have always done under Fred McCaffrey. Like, they just know how to score the basketball. Okay, and if you play Iowa and you don't shoot the ball well, like the Hoosiers didn't, then you're immediately in trouble. And you're definitely not going to win against Iowa when you shoot the ball poorly and you have more turnovers than assists. 16 turnovers, 15 assists for Indiana on Saturday night. And look, I don't care who you're playing. Okay, you could be playing a high school team. If you do that, you're probably not going to win. Okay? And look, I tried really hard last night. I couldn't find the number, though. I wanted to find the record of teams where they have games where they have more turnovers than assists. I couldn't find it. That's a lot of data to find. But I'm willing to bet that the record of teams that have more turnovers than assists in a game isn't good. I bet that they lose a lot of basketball games. Okay, when Indiana won 6 games in a row, they were doing a great job at not turning the ball over. Okay, they averaged only 9.2 turnovers per game in that stretch. The one game where they turned the ball over way too much came against Penn State. All right, they turned it over 14 times in that game. But Indiana shot 39% from 3 in that game. Okay, and look, if you shoot 39% from 3, especially in college basketball, you have a great chance to win that game. Okay, if you're going to turn the ball over a lot, like Indiana did against Iowa, you better shoot better than your opponent. And Indiana did not do that in the slightest against Iowa. Iowa shot 46% from 3 to Indiana's 25%. Okay, Iowa shot 54% from the floor as a whole to Indiana's 41%. That's unacceptable. You have to defend better if you're going to give away that many free possessions. Okay, and the thing is, Iowa created a way for Indiana to win because Iowa turned it over 13 times. If Indiana just figures out a way to hold on to the basketball, then they probably have a much better chance at winning that game. So Indiana has got to find a way to shoot the ball better. That's always the answer to everything. Okay, just shoot better and you'll probably win. That's what Purdue did yesterday. We'll hit on them here in a second. Indiana's got to shoot the ball better. They have to not turn the ball over. When you turn the ball over 16 times, you just make things really tough on yourself. Okay, Omar Ballo also has to take more than 7 shots. That is far too few. Okay, he needs 12 to 15 shots a game. Okay, especially when there's no Malik Renew who can also score on the inside. That's the other really interesting thing. After they lost that game last night, 2 nights ago, I was on Twitter. Didn't see any. We don't need Malik Renews anymore. Didn't see any tweets like that. Didn't see any comments like that. When your team only shoots 41% from the floor, it'd be really nice to have your leading scorer available. Okay, they have got, to get Malik Renew back, they have got to find a way to defend the 3-point line better, and most importantly, they have to find a way to, to get more open shots, to make them, and to make sure that Omar Ballo gets the touches that he needs. Okay, 7 shots for a guy who's arguably been their best player all year is simply not enough. Okay, it's not enough. You have to be better than that. So they're going to be fine, though. I don't think that they're going to continue to shoot that poorly. Luke Goody was 1 of 6 from the field. He's a good shooter. I don't think that that's going to continue. Mbako continues to struggle. You would think that he eventually gets it figured out. Trey Galloway, 0 of 2, didn't shoot. He didn't shoot the ball very well either. So they didn't shoot the ball well, and sometimes that happens. Kanan Carlisle, 4 of 12. That's just the fact that he got to take 12 shots is absurd to me. But Indiana, they're going to be fine. they've got a really tough game tomorrow night. They're hosting Illinois. Illinois is a really good basketball team. You know, they went up to Oregon and beat the crap out of Oregon. Like they're a really good team. So Indiana needs to bounce back in a big way tomorrow night. They're going to have to shoot the ball well because Illinois can score it. Purdue, on the other hand, they just keep rolling. I'm over here doing basketball one-on-one with IU. Don't turn the ball over. Make sure your best player takes more than 7 shots. Meanwhile, Purdue is just like, yeah, we're going to stomp Rutgers. Braden Smith's going to put on a masterclass. 14 assists in that game against Dylan Harper, who's probably going to be the first guard off the board in this year's NBA draft. And then they played Nebraska last night, and they just, jeez. Like, you thought what Iowa did to Indiana was bad. You should have seen what Purdue did. They took them behind the woodshed, and they never brought them back out. I mean, 104 to 68. They beat them by 36 points. That's incredible. 36. Like high-level Division I teams beat like non-conference opponents that are mid-majors and predicted to finish last in their conference. They beat those teams by 36. Okay, not other conference teams that are by all accounts at least solid. Like, was Nebraska going to win the Big Ten this year? Probably not. But were they a good team? I thought that they were. And Purdue was just like, yeah, we're going to beat you 104 to 68. And we're basically going to run perfect offense for 40 minutes. Braden Smith, once again, with 14 assists. That's just an insane number of assists for a college player. Purdue also shot 58% from 3. That's absurd. 19 of 33 from 3 in a college game is insane. They shot 61% from the floor overall, which is also insane. And then you got Nebraska, who just didn't shoot it well, right? 6 of 27 from 3. As a whole, they shot 48% from the floor, which is normally good enough, right? Like, usually, if you shoot 48% from the floor and you play good, tough defense and all those things, then you give yourself a chance. But when Purdue shoots the ball unconsciously, like they did in that game last night, or I guess yesterday afternoon, you're not going to win that game no matter what you do. NFL playoffs, they're in full swing. Vikings, Rams tonight. Give me the Rams to win outright. They're 2.5-point dogs. Just give me the better quarterback. Right, give me Matthew Stafford over Sam Darnold. Sam Darnold, excellent story, right? Could be a Colt this next season. But with that being said, like, I don't care. Like, give me the better quarterback. Give me the quarterback that's won several playoff games. Give me the quarterback that's won a Super Bowl, that's coached by a coach that has won a Super Bowl with multiple weapons and a young defense that's really improved throughout the season. So, give me the Rams tonight. I do think that they beat the Vikings, even though the Vikings are a fun story. Brian Flores is going to do his best to wreak havoc, but when you have a quarterback like Matthew Stafford, who's been around the block and has seen everything and is also the best quarterback in that conference, I'm going to take that guy every single time. Brian Flores has done an excellent job with a lack of talent on his defense, figuring out ways to get stops and generate turnovers and those things. I don't think that happens tonight against, once again, the best quarterback in that conference. Just an absolutely awesome show today. Just absolutely loaded. It was fantastic. Hopefully you enjoyed it. Make sure to follow me on Twitter at __ Jonathan Smith. You can hear a little bit more from me on the Dan Dockett Show, which is set to run today from noon to 3. He's back in the building. Phone calls at 317-228-1430 through his whole show. Power Hour should be happening today at 2 o'clock. It's going to be a great show. Like, noon to 3, it is can't miss radio. The Dan Dockett Show is set to go. If you want to hear more from me, you can hear me on Dan's show. I've also got a YouTube channel, Shooting the Schmitz, if you want to hear more from me there. It's a lot more mainstream stuff, okay? A lot of NBA, a lot of NFL playoffs, a lot of college football playoff. Notre Dame, they're set to play Ohio State a week from now. Notre Dame opening up as 8.5-point underdogs in that one, that's a large line for a national title game. Part of that's just because Ohio State's absolutely rolling. So thanks for tuning in. I greatly appreciate it. I'll be back on the air tomorrow from 10 to noon. Zach Pirles is set to join me. He's a writer over at CBS Sports. We're going to talk about the wild card round, everything that transpired in the football world. That is tomorrow at 10:20. You don't want to miss that. Coming up here in 5 minutes, it's the Dan Dockett Show. I will talk to you tomorrow starting at 10 a.m.
Unfiltered.